I'm Lee Cabana, and this video is a supplement to a story that I wrote for the May and June 2017 front site on a practical guide to using Sketchup. I tried using Sketchup in the past, tried a couple of times actually, and gave up. It was frustrating. Props and targets would spin, float, sink between things, fall between the floor, and it was just too much to try to figure out how to learn. There was actually too much information out there. All I needed to do was to learn some simple, basic functions, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't even know what questions to ask, so I gave up. Last year, though, I was able to connect with two people that became my mentors in SketchUp, and those are Range Master instructor Gary Johnson and Range Master Jody Human, who showed me the steps, made me realize really how simple SketchUp is for what we need to use to design stages. So my goal here is to take you through that process, and in maybe 20 minutes or so give you a feel for actually how to use it and to design stages. So the first step is to download SketchUp. Once you've downloaded it, you'll be asked to select a template. It really doesn't matter which template you pick. Go ahead and pick one. If you've already downloaded it, go ahead and launch it. And you can see I already have done that. We have SketchUp, and I'm going to open New. And here we go. You can see that's my template. I've got Joe Casual here, as well as the default axes that can help for guiding and placing things. So the first thing we're going to do, we don't need Joe, so let's click on him, and I'm going to delete him by using the delete key on the keyboard. There we go. And I really don't need the axes, so I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to come up here to View, Axes, and deselect. So now I have a nice clean screen. There are a number of tools that you'll use a lot in SketchUp. First is Select. Coming over here, these three you'll use to maneuver around the screen and through your stage. The first is the Orbit. Next is Pan, though the pan also has some zoom functions in it. And then of course we've got Zoom itself. We'll be using the Move tool, and surprisingly you use the Move tool to do most of your rotations. There is a Rotate tool that you'll sometimes use, and I'll show you a little bit about that, and Push-Pull. So let's get started. We'll come over here to this icon, the 3D Warehouse. Click on that. This gives us access to the 3D Warehouse, which has a near infinite number of models and things of all kinds. But what we really want is USPSA. So let's just enter USPSA and hit enter. Here are all sorts of items. There are complete stages, things like individual props and targets. There's also, for example, here where we have a collection of many props and targets. You can download these, save them on your system, and pick and choose individual components to build your stage with. For right now, though, we want to pick a stage that I've set up for this exercise. So please search for USPSA Front Site Example 1. Hit enter. Well, it's not there, so let's see what happened to it. Try it again. I see I put front sight together. There we are. All right, so we're going to place this into our model. We do that by clicking the download arrow, click and release. Load into the model, okay. And by the way, the click and release function is a good habit to get into. One of the secrets of learning SketchUp is to select, click, and release. So we're brought here and we can see the Move tool. Don't click the mouse, but just move the mouse a little bit. There we go. and we can see our prop. Let's kind of drag it somewhat into position. When we got it about there, let's click and release. Let's go up to the select function and click a couple of times outside to get rid of the select bars. And let's maneuver it with the orbit key. Now the orbit key, when you place it, where you place it establishes the pivot point of this function. So if we click and hold here, you can see my pivot point is up here, which is a little too high. I'm going to come down here, click and hold. Now I'm pivoting around, there we go, and up. And let's zoom in with the hand key. I can, zoom in, and let's move it a little bit like this. All right. So now it appears that we have, click over here and select, we have 4 sets of props. The start X's, 1 fault line, a wall, and 2 targets in a no-shoot. We'll click. You can see the blue lines. Those 2 X's are linked together as a group. We have the fault line, which is a little group all to itself. And you can see here the target, the wall has the wall, the uprights, and the target stand. These are actually separate units or pieces in this. However, when we click, you notice that they are all highlighted by this blue box. This means that this wall is a group and can move and function as one unit. Let's go up to the orbit key, come around, and now you can see a little bit, yeah, see that is one unit. Right, so let's orbit back to get this centered like this. Go up and pick select. Let's look at the targets. Click on the left, the right, and the no-shoot. What this is showing is that this array is really not a group. They're 3 separate items. Let's give an example, and an example of a key that I use a lot. So I've highlighted the no-shoot. We come up to Edit and Cut. I've now removed it from our stage, but I've just realized that's a mistake, something I really didn't want to do. So I come back up to Edit. There's an Undo Cut. Click, and I'm back. Almost every mistake that you make in building a stage can be fixed by undo. But for the purposes of this little exercise, I want to make these 3 a group just like the wall is. So we're going to make sure we've got the select arrow and come up here and drag with the mouse. Make sure I've got all 3 pieces highlighted, release, and now I've got my blue lines over all 3. I want to turn those into a group. So again, we come up to Edit, Make a Group, and click. Now you can see that my array is a group of targets, just like my wall is a collection of pieces too. Let's focus on our newly created group right now. Let's see how we move this. I like to do this with a more of a 2/3 angle, so let's select the orbit. There, okay, so now I can see my top and sides. We will now go to the Move tool, click and release. You can see when I hover over the top of the Move tool, I've got these red arrows. I get those red, not arrows, but red crosses. I get those crosses even in this view. I don't want to do anything on the front. I'm going to be moving up here. So let's hover over a red cross. The protractor appears. That is my cue to click and release. I can now rotate or move that target as I want. Just like that. Let's click and release. And still in the Move tool, you'll notice as I come down here, a violet colored circle with a X appears. I can move the target with this if I want. I actually don't use this particular method to move very often, but let me show it to you. So I hover. You can see everything is has appeared, the crosses also. I click and release, and now I can move this a little bit, just like that. Let's actually come up like this. Something I don't like to do, but I've made created a mistake for you, which is good. So I'm going to click and release. Let's see what I've done. Hit the orbit, and lo and behold, there is my floating target, something I really don't want. Very easy to fix. I'm going to come up to Edit, Cut, Paste, click and release. Okay, I'm back at grade level again. I'm going to come over here. You can see I'm trying to rotate my target, but my X's up here are not showing up. That's because sometimes I need to get a little closer. Let's zoom in. Let's angle it a little bit. Move. Here's my X's. Protractor. Click and release. We'll get that just like that. And click and release. Let's zoom out a little bit. While I have this target array highlighted, I want to make a copy of it. So we'll go up here, copy, and we're going to paste. I'm going to set that one right there, click and release. So let's imagine that this is not exactly where I wanted this array. I'm just going to come up here, edit, cut, paste, and then position it where I want. I actually do a lot of cutting and pasting and positioning my target. So we'll click and release. Let's orient this a little better. There we go. And I'm going to come down here. Now this array I don't really want here, so I'm going to select, click, edit, cut, paste, and we'll stick that down range here, so the shooter's going to have to lean around this wall to get to it, and I've clicked and release, so it's where it needs to be. Alright, so let's zoom a little bit. We're going to select again, click on these targets. Now what I want to do is create a stage with a target stand on either side of this wall. And I got my setup here, but I've glued them together. I've made a group. I don't want that. So we're going to ungroup them using the explode command. If you are using a Mac like I am, you'll touch and hold down the control key. If you are using a Windows, it's the right click on the mouse. So I'm holding down my control key and clicking, and I'm going to come down here and explode that group. So I'm now back where I started with this. I've got two targets and a no-shoot. Let's click on the no-shoot, which I now really no longer want. So let's cut it out. We'll take this target by clicking on it. We're going to cut. We're going to paste. I'm going to drop this one right over there. Select, highlight, edit, cut, paste, and we'll put that one right over there. Let's orbit a little bit to get a better overhead view. Now these targets I really want, and you can see here as I'm moving, I realize these targets aren't exactly where I want, so I'm going to just go ahead and cut, paste, get that a little bit like that, just like that. Okay, so I want to angle these targets in a little bit. So I have on my move over here, click, release, got it right about where I want it, right there, click, release, select, click on my other target, move, click, release, and now I've angled that in. Wonderful. Alright, so let's move a little further out here. Okay. Now the next step is I want to set up my shooting area. And of course I got my fault line. Let's select it. Select, click, release, and I'm going to cut it, paste, maneuver it right about there and drop it. Then I'm going to paste it again right about there. Okay, those fault lines are where I want them, but I want them a little longer. So let's rotate. I want a better angle. Come in here like this, and let's zoom in a little bit. Let's push out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is come up here next to my select, and I'm going to double click on this one. We're going to come up now to the push-pull, where I will click and release. And I take my mouse, come down here, and you'll notice that when I touch that with the butt end of the fault line, I get a bunch of dots on the fault line. That means I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm now going to click on the mouse, holding it down and pulling it longer. You'll see that my right hand fault line is moving right along with it because it is a copy of the other fault line. And in this situation where I've got working with parallel fault lines, this works fine. So I'll come right here like that, release. I'm going to come up here and select, double click out there to get things looking right. So now I got these fault lines. Let's maneuver a little like that. All right, so even though the rule book tells us that these fault lines extend rearward to infinity, I want to put a cross piece there just to seal off our shooting area. So what I'm going to do is, again, come back, select, click, copy, and I'm going to paste, put one right here. Now I'm going to come to got my rotate tool already actually selected. Come over here, and lo and behold, there, you can see the red arrows, where are they? Or red crosses. I've got my protractor. I click, release, and now I can turn that around right about there, right where I want it. I'm going to now click and release, but that's not where I want it, so I am going to edit, cut, paste, and I'm going to stick it right there. All right, and I've clicked and released. So let's zoom out a little bit. Okay. Now this is okay, but this is very sloppy. We don't want that, so we need to get rid of that that section. So let's rotate, or I should say orbit, come around here. All right, so I've got a good view of that end of the fault line. Let's select, double click, push pull, click and select. Position till we see our dots. Click and push. Oh, look what happens here. Because my third line was a copy of these first two parallel lines, when I move it, it's moving all of them. Where that was good before, it's not good now. So we got to fix that. So we're going to come up, let's select, and click a couple of times to get back to our proper color. We are going to hold down the Control key, again, if you are a Mac, and if a Windows, it's a right click. So it's Control, Edit, and what we want to do is make this unique. Hold on, let's try this again. All right, right there. Click and make unique. That way, any function that we do on this fault line will not affect anything else. So let's, again, double click, push pull, dots, click, hold down, and now we're going to tighten that up. release, select, click out a little bit, let's orbit, whoops, come down here to my where I really want to orbit from, come around like that, whoops, and let's pan, get back to where you need to be, and let's actually, whoops, right, like that. That's right around. Now, just to make sure everything is a little neater, we're going to highlight, double click, and let's extend that one just a little bit to make sure it's nice and there we go. Okay, so again, select, click outside there somewhere, pan, okay, let's go back a bit, let's orbit, alright, beautiful. Now let's place our X's for our toes, select, click, let's cut, we'll paste, and we'll put them right there, click and release. Alright, so that stage is coming together pretty good. Let's select and click. Now if we are going to be submitting this stage to NROI for approval, we want to label our targets. So what we'll do is come up here to Tools, Text. You can place this right in the target, click and hold down the mouse, draw up here while you're holding, release, and we're going to type in T1, hit enter, and enter again. We know this one's going to be T2, click and hold, excuse me, that's going to be T4. T4, return, return. Let's get to those back targets. Let's zoom in on them, and there we go. Again, Tools, Text, click, hold, come up here, release. That is going to be T2, return, return, and this one's going to be T3. T3, return, return. Okay, that's coming together nicely. Let's zoom out a little bit. And the next thing is, let's take a look to see what this stage looks like from the start position of the shooter. And one of the tools that we use is the camera. And we want to position our camera. And you notice this comes into a little guy, almost looks like a pepper popper. We'll put it right here, click and release. And now that's what this looks like from the perspective of the shooter in the start position. We can hold down the mouse, we can look to the left, and we can look to the right. All right. Let's do our zoom. Let's zoom out. And let's see what this looks like from the position of the RO that's running the paper. Camera. Position camera. We'll put him over here. Alright, that's what he sees. And again, we can come here and he's looking to the right. And that's what that range officer sees. Alright, so let's rotate again. Now that we're pretty much wrapped up, we want to get the stage ready to either send to NROI or publish for our own match. So let's come here. And what we'll do is come back up to the camera, click, and you can see standard views. Come over here to top, click. Now you notice we're already on our pan tool, so let's pan up. There we go. And you'll notice that the target names also are still visible from this angle. They will turn to see our own view. We want to try to zoom fill as much of the screen with this. Right there. So here is our overhead view for submission to an ROI, and of course it's not only an overhead view, it's also drawn to scale. So no more getting out graph paper and laboriously writing that up. We've got our overhead view. If we want to print this, and we need to send it to out of here, we can come up to File, Export. We always want to export the 2D graphic, and I'm going to call this overhead, and we'll put it just on my desktop. There, that's done. But I also want to be able to put this into the stage description that'll be stapled up at the stage. So let's come back to Orbit. All right, Orbit, let's zoom in a little bit. I always like to get as close as we can. Let's Orbit, Orbit. Zoom, zoom, I mean. Okay, pan like this. And again, we're going to come up to File, Export, 2D, and I'll call that Front View. We'll also save that to the desktop. The way to actually get this into your stage description is you'll open the stage description from Word, and then using the import function in Word, identify the file that this is in, and just import it into the stage description. So this is pretty much the end of my demonstration. I hope after this you can get the basics of maneuvering, placing, arranging targets, and you'll have enough information now to search and know the questions to ask. So for example, if we wanted to put a hole, a port in this wall, you would go to YouTube and search SketchUp hole in wall, and that'll tell you how to do it. So that is the end of this video. Thanks for taking a look at it, and I hope you find it helpful.